Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here. So we're out on Monday the 3rd of Feb. So just published the last video focusing upon the installation of the gearbox and the gearbox inner cover. So now we'll move across to the primary drive side of things, and the first consideration is something that a kind gentleman by the name of John has been helping out with respect to the conundrum we had when we did the first fit regarding this thrust washer stroke bearing being slightly an incorrect fit, and he's correctly identified that the hub is wrong. So I checked out some of my spares, and unfortunately the spare that I have is exactly the same. That's wrong. And some of these were originally purchased a long while ago from C&D Autos, so obviously you got my specifications wrong. I've also checked the basket as well. I think the basket's right, and I do have a spare one of those, but obviously that's not going to address the problem. So I've got another hub on order, a B50 hub, 574200 I think is the part number, and that should be here tomorrow. And we'll then rebuild the clutch, and we can't really do too much else on the primary drive side without the clutch, because everything needs to go on together. The clutch, the primary drive crank sprocket with all the starter clutch, etc., starter chain, primary chain, that all needs to go on as one. But what we can do is finish off a bit on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the final drive chain. Make sure we tighten up this nut here, the final drive sprocket, and bend over the new tab, and then we'll install the back cover, the clutch back cover, and basically then we'll be ready to proceed with this side once I receive that clutch hub. So what I'll do then first is dig out the chain, which I've already got in stock for the correct length, the correct size, and we'll just feed that through and see what it looks like. We'll do a bit of tidying up here as well, as I've been routing through parts, etc., checking out clutch hubs. Right, I'll bring you back shortly. Okay, sprocket now secured, tightened, tab washer bent over, chain on. However, 2 steps forward but 1 back, in that we can't get the chain over the rear sprocket, because although it's the right number of the teeth, it's the wrong thickness. It's for a thicker chain. So luckily looked in stock and found the correct one, which as you can see is noticeably thinner, but is the right number of teeth, and is not in bad condition. It'll clean up okay without needing replating. However, to do that we've got to get the rear wheel off, so that's a job for another video. But what we can do though is, because we've managed to get the chain on at this end, we can proceed now and get that clutch backing plate in there. So that's quite simple. Quick gasket, bit of sealer on either side. In fact, let's get the plate so you can see it, because it's got the oil seal in the centre. Now then, it's not in there. Ah, it's over here with the rest of the parts. There it is. Oil seal in the centre. The seal's the correct way round because it's preventing oil from escaping from the primary case. So the oil seal springs on the inside. So that just slips on there, and the seal seats on that face there, which is the end face of the gearbox top gear. It goes all the way through. So we'll fit that up now, and it's just 6 countersunk screws all the way around. So I'll bring you back in a sec once that's mounted up. Right, clutch backing cover on. That went on fine actually. I made sure that the oil seal was inserted properly so that it seals well on the inner surface. And also done a few other bits and pieces too. So we've got the slipper tensioner in place with its adjusting bolt and lock, nut and seal. We've got the stator wire guide inserted, and that's got a lip on that so you can actually seal it with a rubber grommet that fits over that. And then we've got various nuts ready to go, so that once we've got the correct clutch hub we can put all that lot together at the same time. And what we can do if you really want to play is the outer cover is part held on by these 2 longer studs that also hold the stator. And there we go. We'll just do that to keep the crud out of it for now until hopefully tomorrow when the clutch hub arrives. And that's all we can do on that side now. So what we'll do now is we'll zip across to the other side, and we can focus on now the gearbox outer cover here. Now this has already been pre-built. It needs a bit of a clean up actually, but we've got the gear change retained spring here in its housing. We've also got the clutch actuation mechanism pushed. It works on the push rod, so that's done. So all we need to do really is we've got to on the end of the main shaft here we've got to put the kickstart ratchet, and there's a bit of work to do there. We've got to decrease the depth of that nut because it is a special thread on here, but I've got that nut that fits, but it's not the right depth. It's too deep. So we'll dress that nut, get all the other bits and pieces together. That's the kickstart return spring, kickstart quadrant. Sits in there. Like so, and when you press the kickstart down, left hand kickstart, when you I've got it in the wrong way around, but no I haven't, that's it, so it stops there. That's it, this noggin's the other side of the stop that's there now. So when you kick down it engages on the ratchet pinion, which will sit up there. Not too much to do really on that side because the outer cover is all built up. But first of all we'll give this a bit of a wash and make sure it's clean. But it looks pretty good anyway, not too bad. Okay, sourced a set of different sized split pins this afternoon from Halfords. They do a little pack of various sizes, and found one that fits perfectly, so just cut it to size. You can't quite see it there, but one of the legs on the left hand side is bent backwards, so split pin in and ready to go. So now we can focus then on the getting the outer cover on, which I've cleaned up. Not in the ultrasonic cleaner this time, I didn't need that, but just giving it a good bathe and a bit of washing, gunk and then water, and that's cleaned up nicely. So what we need to do now first though is we need to fit the kickstart ratchet mechanism on the end of the main shaft, just on there on those splines. So we'll put that lot together, and as I said before, I just needed to what should we say, just need to make a few modifications to the nut that I have. It's the correct thread, but it's too deep, so we'll tidy that up a bit, probably split it in two and then dress it on the grinder, and once I've done that I'll bring you back. Okay, job done. So we've got the pinion on sliding on a bush with a spring behind it, then its counterpart ratchet on this side, secured by a nut with a tab washer. So if you do it the opposite direction, the ratchet will work. And with respect to this kickstart, then the pinion isn't engaged when you're not kicking. There we go. So the normal position of the kickstart is there, and so the ratchet's only to protect the teeth on the pinions, etc., when the kickstart is down and the engine fires, before you release the kickstart. So there we go. That's that done. So we're now ready to install the cover. But before we do that, what you actually do is, I think if I remember correctly, is we install the kickstart shaft in the outer cover and prime the spring. So that'll be the next job, and then we'll be ready to put the outer cover on. Okay, so we're going to load up the outer cover now with the kickstart return spring and the quadrant. And then what we'll need to do is load the whole lot up onto the inner cover once we've got it in position on here. We will have to turn the kickstart on its quadrant to make sure this stop here is underneath the corresponding stop there once we slide it on. But that's usually not too difficult, he says, and the best thing to use to do that is the kickstart lever itself. So I'll dig that out now and we'll get all prepared. Initially I'll get this loaded up and hope it doesn't bite me. Okay, that's it installed and semi-tensioned, and the reason why it holds there is because luckily the leading tooth catches on that lug, which actually helps you out. But when we offer this up, we've got to turn this further that way so that the stop here is roughly in that position, which obviously when you turn it over it's 3 o'clock position, so that when we push it home it's underneath the official stop there rather than this tooth here being the unofficial stop at the moment. So that's there. So what we'll do now is alright, we need to take the dome nuts off the locating studs here. It's just there just to make sure we don't lose them, and then we'll offer up the gasket, which I've got. Just check the parts book to make sure I haven't missed anything. I don't think I have, and then we'll go for it. Okay, I've check that I've got everything in place ready to go. I've now got the gasket on there with a very thin smear of silicone on each side. One thing that I had forgotten was that on these locating studs there's also the locating dowels to put in position, so we've done that as we had those, and they will then slot into the corresponding enlarged holes on here, and we've got the kickstart ready to go. So I'll need 2 hands for this, but once we've tapped it on, I'll bring you back. Right, we're nearly there. I did have the screws in and slightly tightened them up, but the kickstart is working, but it's very stiff, and also I can't quite get the faces to mate at this end, so there's something wrong around here. So I've just taken the screws out, and we're just going to lift this and see if we can determine what's tightening up too much or what's rubbing. It might be just that the kickstart quadrant spindle on the other side isn't quite lining up properly, but I don't remember having this problem when we did the first fit. But anyway, let's take the cover off and see what's going on. Okay, just had the cover off and found that the with respect to the kickstart quadrant, it's 2 pieces of fair with the quadrant onto the shaft, and it wasn't quite seated properly. And I've just refitted that case, and it's now mating at the back here. I've got one of the dome nuts and a screw, and it's mating at the back, and the kickstart is very free. There's no spring in there at the moment. So we'll take that cover off, and we'll put the spring in, and we'll try it again. Okay, job done. Cover on, all screws and nuts in place. Kickstart a little tiny bit stiff, but not too bad at all really, and it does work. Gear lever, that's trying to work too. And for an added bonus, that means we can put the just do a quick test fit of the rear engine plate, and that's fine. And also behind there, you can't see it very well down there, that is the main stand return stop, so it doesn't bash the engine, etc. So that's that for now. There is one slight challenge left, in that the kickstart shaft doesn't have a groove cut in the splines for the pinch bolt on the kickstart. So as a result, the bolt won't go all the way through. So I need to think about that. I think the easiest thing would probably be to grind down the centre of that bolt slightly and pre-fit it on this before you install it, but then you're relying just upon the tightness of effectively the clamp on the splines, rather than the bolt in a slight groove on the shaft also acting as a retaining mechanism to stop it falling off. So I'll need to think about that, but that's minor in the scheme of things. So very chuffed with that, and we can move on next to the primary side. And I said, I think in the last video, that a kind gentleman, an interested party, and I believe subscriber John, had identified that we had the wrong clutch hub, which is why we were having size issues with the thrust washer, and he correctly stated this is an earlier hub, we needed the later one, 5740-200, and there it is, and lo and behold, it's a perfect fit. I think also it seems to be roughly about the same depth, but it's a little higher too, and that would explain why I was having to mess around with a bit of a spacing washer before, which I probably won't need now either. So we'll leave the primary drive and get the clutch for the next video, but I'll probably crack on with that straight away. So anyway, for the purposes of gearbox cover, etc., all done. So we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. For any interest, comments and subscriptions, and I'll see you again soon in the next video. Thanks again everyone. Cheers, bye bye.